Okay, so today we're going to talk to Kevin Halcott. Kevin is an old sync friend, basically OG. And as far back as
Mhm.
I can remember, Kevin's been around and shared his synchronicities and been on the scene. So, Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into synchronicity and what you do? Just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started here.
Surely. Yeah, and great to be back with you and chatting, Jake. It's like great to be back in the saddle, as they say, or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm Kevin, and I guess I came to the synchro-mysticism stuff pretty early in the game. How I got there, I guess, would be like sort of a whole long story, but I guess I like dropped out of high school and traveled the country. I'm writing a book right now, which I guess we'll get to when we
Yeah,
chat.
yeah. Yeah, we'll jump into that soon. We don't have to give like
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
the
yeah,
full history of synchromysticism. We'll focus more on what we're doing now, but a little bit of a recap, sure, you know.
yeah, yeah. So it's basically like, I don't know, I had some interesting experiences with coincidence in high school and with psychedelics and stuff, and I became quite suspicious that something was going on, something intelligent, something bigger,
Yeah.
and mysterious and magical and stuff. And I like been paging through my old journals. It's been amazing to read the like journals of a 17-year-old just starting to pick up on this stuff. But like, so yeah, like dropped out of high school and traveled the country and was just kind of chasing the taste of real reality. I wanted like to know what the real world was like, uncut outside of institutions and um, that kind of stuff. And so I traveled the country and hung out in these different, kind of like folk punk radical art circles, kind of living outside of societies, stuff. And on that road trip, I had a travel in the country, meeting all these people. I had like a weird mystery illness thing that happened, and a whole bunch of meaningful coincidences along the way. And so when I woke up in the hospital at the end of this wild road trip, finding out that I had to have my like appendix removed, and it almost burst and could have been a whole emergency. I kind of like woke up from that string of coincidences and that like sort of near death experience with the uh, appendicitis and just was like really certain that something was going on in the world that was meaningful and important. And I woke up to the magic and the mystery of life that day, I guess, and kind of from that point on was dedicated to like uncovering the mystery of like life and the human spirit and like what life is, why I'm still here and all that kind of stuff. And started voraciously like reading esoteric literature and trying to figure out what my fellow humans from the past had also been grappling with as to like why am I here? What am I?
Were there
What's a
like
spirit? What's a body? So
were there
that
like
kind of like mhm.
particular authors that you gravitated towards or that you found when this stuff was happening and when you started out?
So it started out definitely like as I was just working on my book, picking up on this kind of stuff. Like definitely started out with some like inspiration from like the beatniks and like the 1960s kind of like
Yeah.
uh what were the Merry Pranksters, and there was this whole kind of group of people that were kind of like dropping out and tapping into this like psychedelic larger mystery and spirit and all that was coming into the West, at that time. And so I was kind of hip to that stuff. And like Hunter S. Thompson definitely
Yeah.
had like a Thompson fascination because as a kid, like, psychedelics kind of like represent like the leading edge of freedom. And as a kid, you're very stoked on freedom and stuff. And so like psychedelics and that was very intriguing in my like yearning for freedom. So um yeah, yeah, I think the Hunter S. Thompson thing was a flavor that really impressed on me. I'm not like a major big fan of his these days, but back then it was very intriguing, the idea of like, I don't know, psychedelics and psychedelic perception and kind of like taking in the world in this gonzo psychedelic way. And um
Yeah.
so it was, yeah, that kind of stuff. And then like read this really great book called Ishmael when I was in school. It's like a really rad book about like um I don't know, it's a very existential book, but it deals with basically kind of like occupation and colonization and existentialism and That book really tripped me out too. I got to say that one shaped my mind a bit.
Mm.
But so yeah, so I was traveling the country, having these weird coincidences. Woke up from this mystery illness thing, and then just kind of um, started reading a lot of stuff, and like that was when I kind of started tapping into like there was like a sense of apocalypsism in the world at the time too. It was like 9/11 had happened a few years earlier, and the war was happening, and like so before I had found the esoteric stuff, I'd felt this apocalypsism, and the punk music I was hip to kind of carried that awareness that like everything we were doing was going to come to some kind of great change. And um, I like got to say that when I started studying the esoteric stuff, I found out about this like Age of Aquarius thing that the Western astrological tradition was proposing, and it sort of started to make some sense that there was this like, oh, it's not like this end of the world apocalypse in this like total physical way that I'm sensing. There's actually like a story going on here that's like much larger and longer, and like there's this Kali Yuga thing. And
Did that
so
ever connect for you with in any meaningful way to like 2012 and those ideas that people were really getting hyped
exactly,
up about?
yeah, that all started kind of coming together there. Like it I as I started like realizing my own sense of this apocalypsism arising, and um then I found like, oh wow, they're calling this like this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius and like the end of this old world and the Kali Yuga. And then you find out, the Mayan calendar is ending. And so for me, it was like all the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. And I felt like my existential dread that had once kind of hovered over me in high school about the world being so like wrong, or like stuff being not right, out of sync or whatever, when I discovered these like larger narratives of like the aeonic changes and stuff. And then you got like Aleister Crowley, comes in, and got the dawning of the Aeon of Horus. And so there's all these like narratives, these larger narratives that I started picking up on that were like assuring me that there was some like meaningful big story going on, and that like uh yeah, the sense of apocalypse was maybe not just about something ending, but something also kind of like birthing, and
Yeah.
uh, and that led me down the rabbit hole of like then I started discovering the stuff like Jordan Maxwell and Robert
Yeah.
Anton Wilson, and
Yep.
Robert Anton Wilson, that changed the game. That was once you open that portal, it's kind
Yeah.
of a guarantee you're going down the rabbit hole sometimes.
Yeah, I think a marker for a lot of people, definitely for me, that was sort of a pivotal change, a certain trajectory, which happened pretty early on for me, finding Wilson stuff. I had sort of an interest in the Illuminati, just hearing random conspiracy stuff, and then looked up the Illuminati, and luckily, I think, found his stuff instead of some, real conspiracy stuff, his
Right.
sort of psychedelic stuff. And that really, I think, put me on the track of seeing this more spiritual take on those subjects and those themes of
Mm.
that flavor of enlightenment very
Right.
much came into my life
Oh,
through Wilson stuff for sure. And then the synchronicity as well. Like I'd already been into that phenomenon through personal experience, but framing it in a way and hearing another adult or an adult basically when I was a teenager speak of it as like a very significant and real thing that's profound was very meaningful, and I think has permanently stamped that synchronicity in my heart kind of thing. So very,
right. Yeah.
very, very powerful stuff. Um,
Yeah, big ups to Bob, man. He really, love listening to him. Now like 20 years later, re-listening to him, it's like it's almost like comforting hearing like it's like Grandpa talking about the the weird
yeah,
the weirdness. You know what I mean? The high strangeness.
yeah. I would love to hear his take on like Trump and modern AI
Yeah,
and where we're at in this day and age, because I feel like a lot has changed and a lot has stayed the same. But it'd be nice
yeah.
to hear where he would be at in this space, kind of thing.
Totally. I've been re-listening to Cosmic Trigger as I was writing my book. I kind of it's the book is very much like a cosmic trigger of our times kind of thing. And like I was re-listening to it and I realized that Robert Anton Wilson grew up just like 20 minutes away from me in Long Island on New York. And
Cool. Yeah.
me and him have like some really funny, I mean, now that I'm writing the book, I'm realizing there's so much in common. And once I found his work, now that our lives have been kind of like interwoven through
Yeah.
the nature of things now. But it was really funny. Like I always thought his voice sounded so familiar, and he talked about Brooklyn in his like early
Yeah.
interviews, but he never specified like Long Island in this particular part. And I really love in Cosmic Trigger too the way he talks a little bit about his like tribal reality tunnel from Long Island, because that's something that I connect to a lot. So I don't know, it was just like a fun little tidbit where I was like, oh, that's why Bob feels
Yeah.
so close and warm. He's got that Long
Yeah.
Island accent. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Literally. Um, so maybe briefly say when you kind of ran into synchromysticism at least, or and we collaborated early on. We were part of the blog community kind of thing, but how did that come into your awareness? And then we'll just jump into your book and go, just sort of skip ahead so we don't get too bogged down.
Yeah, groovy man. Yeah. So how did I find synchromysticism? So I remember it's funny, I actually found the notes in my records. I'm glad I keep such good journals since I was a child, but I
Yeah,
actually found the note of when I found your first video, which is like so trippy to look at this thing now.
cool.
I wrote the word synchromysticism down. I wish I maybe I can dig up the page for you
Yeah,
later for a screenshot just for fun because
yeah,
it's a fun
sure.
little
Send it. We'll put it on.
um, but it was trippy for digging around through that stuff. And so yeah, I think the funny little sync chain was like Red Cosmic Trigger really turned me on. I'd already been like, like a student of Crowley a little bit, like just digesting all the esoteric stuff I could. And so my hipness to like the Masonic conspiracies and the serious mystery and all this was there. And I think I was kind of just tumbling down the serious rabbit hole. And I found the work of, what was this dude's name? He was a guy out in Austin, Texas, who had a Henry Freeman, the Freeman perspective. He had a
Yeah, I
little
remember Freeman.
thing.
Freeman Fly, or was that something like
Yeah,
that? Yeah,
yeah,
I was thinking about him the other day. Yeah,
yeah. We
yeah,
we did we ended up doing a podcast with him in the Always Record era at some point. I thought it was fun that me and him
right,
finally
right.
synced up.
Yeah, I think I did
But
some podcasts on his show potentially. It's a long time ago, but I remember him being around and interacting for sure.
yeah, I liked his flavor early on. It was like, mix of all the different kind of vibes. And so it
Yeah,
was his work that I think had put me possibly like it was either Wilson that led me down the rabbit hole to him, vice versa. But then yeah, just doing the YouTube, rabbit holing and
yeah,
your
yeah.
video 9/11 mega ritual popped up.
Hmm.
And I'd already been, pretty hip to some of the, like the 9/11 conspiracy vibes. And I grew up in New York, not far from there. Went through a whole traumatic life event that day, not knowing where my father was and stuff. So the whole 9/11 thing was a big
Yeah,
thing in
yeah.
reality for me. And then finding that your work highlighted the cosmic proportion of that event was rather impactful. So yeah, that was it. I found your video about the 9/11 mega ritual um and I had already been like kind of collecting all my own little tidbits of sync at the time. Like it was more conspiracy-ish bits, like kind
Hmm.
of like your own you get every book you can get from the Barnes and Noble about the mysteries, and then you go home and you kind of like start building your own narratives and piecing the puzzle together and stuff. And so I kind of been already doing that, but it was discovering your videos and blog, I think that inspired me to take up the like actual blogging of it, like I'd already been kind of, like I said, collecting all these journals of narratives and putting the mystery together and kind of like following the little breadcrumbs and stuff. But I believe it was your videos that led me to your blog, and that gave me the kind of the template to be like, oh, cool, we can like share this. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Uh, and
Great.
so I feel like, yeah, I kind of like probably launched my blog as soon as I started kind of like felt like I was maybe yeah, almost like following like the Wilson's footsteps of like tracing um the footsteps of the White Rabbit echoing through, you know, pop culture a bit, and just like I kind of started just picking up um my writing kind of, I believe, started with following like Masonic conspiracy elements and a little bit of serious stuff, and um
Yeah, and then
that was like
I
the
also
launch point.
believe there was a pretty interesting interaction between, Jim was sort of introducing me, my friend Jim Saunders, filmmaker and also sync blogger. He
Mhm.
and ayahuasquero, he was sort of
Oh,
introducing me to these ideas of Jupiter symbol looking like a 42. And to me, there was already a lot of significance with Jupiter through 2001 Space Odyssey and its connection to 9/11, and the same year that 2001, same year as 9/11, and the Millennium Hilton, all that stuff.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Jupiter also already played a role in my kind of my narrative, my world of sync, kind of in a profound way. And then he was talking about Jupiter as a really significant to his teacher Juan Flores, and how
Hmm.
42 is connected to Jupiter through the symbol looking like a 4 and a 2, or a 2 and a 4, just that symbol of Jupiter. And you were very much into the rainbow, and it seemed to really tie into what you were going through with that number 42. I see you've got 42 above you, so you have your own relationship to 42. And that, to me, was sort of a nexus of sync that very much kind of framed how I interact with synchronicity, and became kind of like iconic to me of synchronicity as sort of. And it's interesting because Wilson was so into 23. So there's kind of like a number that seems to play a significant role in sync. And for me, and it became 42. And
Right.
just this, but you were tapping into it in your own way as well through the rainbow. I remember at that same time period, which was interesting. I don't know if you,
Yeah, yeah, that was the trippy thing. I was again like, you know, kind of paging through like the trying to trace back when I first got like locked with the 42 thing, you know, and it's one of my first blog posts in my blog Live from the Logosphere. I think the post is called the 42 Enigma, and it's from, might have been like December two, no, it's somewhere in 2008, but real early on, I think before I had even
mm,
known about Jim at all.
hmm.
Um, and so I was kind of like coming off the like Robert Anton Wilson download and seeing the 23s everywhere, picking up on the serious, you know, the kind of like the hyper uh, context of Sirius and pop culture was starting to really come out at me. And then so when Sirius was popping out, it seemed like somehow that like the 42 just like was the next thing to come into my consciousness. And it felt like it
Yeah.
was like by 23. I don't know why that happened, but it just like there was a sudden motion. Like I finished reading, you know, Cosmic Trigger, and then I turned my awareness to like my own life, and then the 42 was like my thing. You know, not saying that I
Yeah.
possess it or whatever, but
No, 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 no.
suddenly felt like I had my like sync number just like Wilson. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. And I kind of like it because it's kind of like Wilson's was 23, and the Jupiter symbol looks like 24. So it's almost like a
that's
log
funny,
it's
right?
a logical next step. It's like, you just go there, and for me, sync, seeing one thing this way around or that way around, it's like I don't think God's mind works that way. And that's what sync to me is about, is realizing the categories
Yeah.
of how we file things are kind of arbitrary. And 42 and 24 are the same thing, just seen from different facets
Ooh, I
of
like
your
yeah, yeah,
non-local
sure.
self, your Picasso, you know, fractally mind, just boop, 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 sees all these things as just aspects of a higher dimensional object. So I don't know. It
Mm-hmm.
just, and it feels to me like it's related to 23, and also and grows out of 23, as being inspired by that whole cluster of sync. So it doesn't feel to me disconnected or like better or anything. It's just like it's its own flavor, and like a child of
Right.
that world in a way. So
Totally. Yeah. It's funny you say that because it's like another element that like is coming up in writing my book, and it's like it feels like a cool little kind of like an alley oop coming from Cosmic Trigger or something. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
realized that actually it was funny too. I was throwing some I Ching recently while working on the book, and like kind of like navigating different all the different paths in my life between like my like career and my music and writing. And so throwing some I Ching for a little just sync guidance scrying whatever. And of course pull up the 40-second I Ching hexagram, which I believe is called increasing is the word. But there's another word for it as well. But it's amazing because its counter hexagram is the 23rd hexagram
That's
in the I
cool.
Ching.
That's cool.
So
Yeah.
that hexagram is breaking apart. And so this is
Yeah.
like a really fascinating thing that I kind of was cracking open here, is that like it seems like the 23, when you go to the I Ching, it means breaking apart. Then you go like the 23-degree angle that the Earth is tilted at, and it's like that breaking from perfect due north, that it's the breaking of that 23-degree angle that creates the mystery of the seasons and like the whole dynamo of a lot of things. And so it's like the 23 is almost like the breaking um, of the unity thing, and then like it seems like 42 is a number that seems to have more of an association of rejoining or increasing or bonding, growing, and sinking or whatever, and like
Yeah.
rainbow unity. And so yeah, like I started picking up on even like the I Ching seems to possess its own like yeah, evidence of this interplay between these two forms, um
Yeah.
and so then you chase that into films, and it's like crazy because like the that's where like my film Thin Skin or Membrane stuff, you find that the rainbow and the rabbit hole and Sirius and the Rainbow Bridge are woven together intimately in these cosmic narratives, and so
I,
yeah, so it's really interesting with this vivifying relationship between the 23 and the 42 is like.
well, I was just also thinking if anybody's sort of wondering why we keep talking about rainbows in the context of 42, uh, it's just because of the angle at which you view a rainbow is 42. Like that's the
Right.
biggest number that's associated to rainbows. If you look up the mechanics of a rainbow, it's like the degrees between the viewer and the top of the rainbow is 42 degrees. There's the science behind it. So
Mhm.
there's just that's how that number relates there. Anyway, so tell
Yeah,
tell us about what
it's-
you're writing now. I'm curious to jump into that.
yeah, sure. So I guess like after we did the sync book, I just kind of sought to capture the work of my film A Thin Skin or Membrane series that I released that way back in like 2010. I think it was like 2010 to like maybe 2013 that I had kind of like put out the four parts to that thing, and that felt like a whole download or whatever. The more I go back to that and I look at that video, I'm like, it's one of those weird things where as an artist, you're like, how did that all come through me and come together? And like, it's like mysterious even when I look back at the video. I'm like, so kind of taking my film A Thin Skin or Membrane thesis and all that stuff, translating it into a book, as well as also like the story of like reflecting on like 20 years of being in this, in this world of things. So the book is called, I believe it's going to be called Chasing Rabbits.
I
And
like
it's like
it.
meant to,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's meant to be like a little bit of a kind of like a cosmic trigger of our times. Like I'm not trying to emulate Bob or force or contrive any similar kind of like delivery, but it's just more of like the in terms of like the type of release or something that it would be is of a cosmic trigger-esque nature, um and it's basically going to be like, yeah, reflection on like 20 years of psychedelics, synchronicity, magic, and conspiracy basically. That's kind of like the gist of a lot of it. Centers around my life experience, kind of like dropping out of high school and chasing kind of like real reality, and as like a young kind of depressed kid, not finding a lot of hope and reason, and order and meaning in the world, I set out on this road trip to travel and kind of like get a taste of the real world. And I had all these meaningful coincidences and kind of like a health scare near death thing. And um, that string of coincidences and that scare like woke me up to the joy of life and reality and the mystery of being. And so that set my course of study out. And I, began studying the esoteric sciences of, all around the world, and mythology and all that kind of stuff. And then I started blogging and collecting all this data and stuff. And so like, yeah, it's kind of like it's a collection of like just like 20 years of uncovering like, mysterious synchronicity in pop culture and cinema, and the magic journey of going to, finding you and realizing that Jim is this other guy writing about this number 42 and the rainbow mystery. It's like a big part of the, the story is this kind of the magic of I'm like receiving this download of information and capturing it in this sync video series. And then you come along and introduce me to this dude Jim in Canada, who's writing about the same number, similar mysteries, like all kind of stuff. And then we meet up, 2 years later, I believe, and we did the Cosmic Tigger in
Yeah.
2010. So
2010.
it kind
Yeah.
of follows my
The year
journey.
we make contact.
Exactly, yeah. And so yeah, it kind of follows like me following the breadcrumbs kind of like um, meeting up with you guys, and we go out and do some ceremony, and then I guess, from there the life, goes on for quite a bit. And like there's, I initiate of a mystery school like Aleister Crowley's Argentum Astrum or Astron Argon. All my studies led me down the rabbit hole to joining the order back in, I want to say it was like 2000. What was it? 11? Well, I think it was 11 or 12. But anyway, I joined the order and started my initiatic journey. And so there's like a whole world of ties here too, where like I realized that the downloads that I was having in the synchromysticism world relating to like the planet Sirius and this rainbow bridge archetype that like is a really large part of the esoteric sciences and a large part of the sync trail that I was uncovering in cinema. I then found wanted to make contact with the particular mystery school that I felt like had the closest thing to the source material that I was looking for in terms of like spiritual, real deep spiritual work and stuff. And so then I ended up finding out, joining the order that, within the esoteric schools, there's obviously like these historic processions called Aeons, and Aleister Crowley, kind of initiated this new age in 1904 with the Book of the Law and the proclamation of the Law of Thelema. And so, what I ended up finding out that's also really fascinating about this is that I was uncovering the sync work about the number 42 on my own intuition, outpouring from internal inspiration, a little bit of inspiration from Bob and the serious stuff, and then I didn't join the AA until like many years after, being a kind of self-initiated student of the mysteries and practitioner of ceremonial magic. And so the AA didn't ever give me any magic or sauce or mystery or anything. Like it was just where I belonged, because my life experience and all the things that I was studying. And so upon joining the order and deepening my studies, I found out that, all along, Aleister Crowley was expecting the dawning of this other new age called the Aon of, writing about Maat and the number 42 and the 42 principles of Maat and going over the rainbow and the rabbit hole. I was hyper fixated on Maat, but had no idea that Aleister Crowley had actually prophesized that the Aeon of Maat and its dawning was actually the era to come, so there's a part of my book here that's also really fascinating is that like I accidentally found out once joining and deepening my occult studies that my contributions to sync surrounding the number 42 and Mott and all these mysteries um, might also actually be really strong, substantive evidence of the dawning of this Aeon of Maat in the esoteric um, school of
Okay,
things.
so to clarify, there's the Aeon of Horus, which he believed was dawning, but there's also
Right.
an there's
1904.
there's and that was so that was for him interpreted as 1904 with the Book of the Law. And
Yeah.
there's a even another one. Is that and that when's that happening? You feel like this is sort of the era we're
So,
in now, or what
so,
is that? How does that fit?
yeah, so, I was really amazed to find out years into my, work in Crowley's system that in the Book of the Law, Crowley, prophesizes the dawning of this next Aeon, the Aeon of Maat. And, obviously the whole Thelemic system of magic and the delivery of the Book of the Law and the dramatic era that, of humanity, spiritual evolution that it represented, that was kind of the focus of the work. So when you jump into, Thelema and all this stuff, you're jumping into the Aeon of Horus, and that's kind of the focus of Thelema at the very moment. But once you're really in the current of the magical stuff, it's understood that actually the Aeon of Horus dawned in 1904, but then you go into like 1930 something, I think, or 1910. This guy Frater Akkad comes along, and he delivers basically like some sync for Aleister Crowley from the Book of the Law regarding like the values of Hebrew letters and numbers and how it syncs with the number 93 as this kind of like key formula for Crowley uncovering this like new spiritual law for humanity. And so Frater Akkad was like a student of Crowley's who the Book of the Law even itself had prophesied that another student or person would come along and deliver parts of the mystery to Crowley to kind of help complete this transmission. And so Akkad comes along and delivers some sync to Crowley, basically about the value of the number 93 and the Hebrew letters A and L. And then Akkad basically realizes that like upon delivering that info to Crowley, that the prophecies of the Book of the Law are unfolding, and that um, that basically Akkad having some of the keys to the Book of the Law, that moment kind of begins the confirmation that the prophecy of the dawning Aeon of Maat incoming is unfolding. And so, because the Book of the Law contains prophecy that another would come along and deliver the keys, and then that once the keys were delivered, then the Aeonic current would continue evolving. And that would then basically be when the Aeon of Maat kind of technically begins dawning, I guess, in maybe most people's opinion. There's so much, controversy in the occult schools and worlds
Of
about
course.
all these fine matters. But in my opinion, I think that you could certainly say it's clear that the Aeonic current of the Mott stuff and the prophecy of like another coming along with some keys and the Aeonic process continuing. I think it's kind of like evident there a little bit with some of that stuff, and Crowley took that to be true, and Akkad took that to be true, and I guess Akkad proclaimed the dawning or the arrival of the Aeon of Maat, maybe even like a co-ruled Aeon, I believe, is what some folks at the time believed, is that Maat actually is the necessary Aeonic spiritual force to like balance all the force and spiritual power of the Horus spiritual current. And so some believe that we live in a kind of co-ruled Aeon of spiritual forces of both represented by the god Horus and the goddess Maat. So
But
in the occult
there's
world, right, we are kind of in the Aeon of Maat,
isn't
and
isn't
you
there like
could
a
say,
direct relationship between 42 and Mott? So
yeah, yeah. So that's the bulk of my contribution to sync was that like when I started my occult studies and like I said, was bouncing off of Wilson's serious work, I realized that there's a whole wild chain of sync here that leads to this. It's like wow, it involves the matrix and all this crazy stuff. like um so the Mott thing is that, the Egyptian model of the universe, the in the afterlife, it's or the all reality is kind of ruled over by the goddess Mott in the Egyptian system. And reincarnation or passing over to the next life is accomplished by the Egyptian initiate or person by satisfying the 42 laws of the goddess Mott.
Yeah.
And it's kind
Mhm.
of like in Egypt, you could transcend to the next incarnation or whatever is next if you, upon death, you go down into Mott's underworld, and her and Thoth and some other deities, they basically weigh your heart against her feather, her ostrich feather. Um, and if your heart is heavier or heavier than a feather, if it's not light as a feather, I think like the deities kind of consume you, and you don't get to like uh you don't pass on to the like transcendence or whatever. I'm sorry, I don't know the full like elegant of that stuff, but basically that was really fascinating to me because I was obsessed with the 40. I started seeing the 42 everywhere. Then I realized the Egyptians lived by the 42. It was the code of their very like being was to live by this 42 principle, the 42 principles. And then I realized that like in the Egyptian cosmology, to get to this underworld of Mat's Duat, you take this boat, which is represented by the White Rabbit constellation Lepus. The Egyptians saw the rabbit constellation Lepus as the boat to the afterlife. So, in a sense, when you're looking at any white rabbit or the constellation Lepus, you're also looking at like a hyper contextual symbol that is like the Egyptian afterlife boat and a pointer toward the Egyptian Duat and its 42 laws. And so, because I was getting hip to Egyptian mysticism and seeing the 42 pop up in the Egyptian mysticism, when I started seeing it pop up in films, I was like blown away by the consistency of the symbolism surrounding it. So, like, if you go to like The Matrix, Keanu Reeves follows the White Rabbit into the Matrix. But then in real life, Keanu Reeves is in a band called Dog Star, and Sirius is the Dog Star. And so this moment was the real key for everything for me that set all this off was like when I realized that Keanu Reeves is in a band called Dog Star and following the White Rabbit on the silver screen. And then in the night sky, the Dog Star follows the White Rabbit.
Jonathan Week. Go to the edge of the desert, look up. Canis Minor, the dog that followed Orion through the sky. You follow the brightest star.
And so, like,
Yeah.
synchromystically, we're finding that that's a sure sign that you're picking up on some really deep hyper context.
Yeah.
When
And I
that
think
stuff
that stuff, obviously that fascinates me. And that's, very much that puzzle of why do we consistently see this bleed through of spiritual things, of archetypal themes, of these mystical themes come through movies. And then I feel like what kind of separates my take on sync, and I feel like maybe the type of sync that you represent, which you can speak on for yourself, but in my view, it's like these things are showing us that there's an underlying spiritual aspect to this, or at least a archetypal force that bleeds through these different realities that we have archetypes, we have the past, we have history, we have these things. And then other creatives in their own sphere will pick up on these frequencies and express it in their own medium. So to me, it shows something mystical, it shows something spiritual, it shows something profound about the unity of everything. But I feel like there's a other interpretation which seems more common and more pervasive in these sort of subjects, which is to see this as like, well, clearly Keanu Reeves is part of some sort of conspiracy, or that media is part of some kind of conspiracy, that there's sort of agendas behind or awarenesses. Like Hollywood elites have awareness of mystical and occult realities, and they express that through their movies and all these other things where, 9/11 becomes like precognitive, like, or suggestive things to get the populace ready. There's like a term for it even that every time I hear it, I see red almost because I'm like, I, I'll think of it in a second, but it's just like this idea that um, we're being prepared by the elites for some nefarious reason by putting these suggestions of then future events that will transpire into media. Just all these sort of strange, I feel like, not elegant, not
Scripts.
yeah, they're more elaborate and they're illogical and
Right.
it's like I mean, I really don't like dissing people because I know
Right.
that's a common interpretation of these things and that, people really believe it. And I don't want to diss people, but I do feel like it sort of is not like, why, if we can interpret the facts as closely as possible and as openly as possible, why would we jump to that conclusion, instead of
Right.
that it is just pure synchronicity? And then what does that tell us, kind of thing? But yeah,
Right.
that thing, I see it so often. Obviously, this Keanu Reeves one is a very powerful example, but sometimes you just see it all the time. Just these little bleed throughs of like things in movies or in other media that clearly reflect like spiritual truths or synchronicities that you see in other mediums. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and I guess to speak to that too is like that's been kind of an alchemical journey for me in the sync, days of early to now. Is like I went from being kind of like a paranoid conspiracy theorist to like I remember like argue like I made the first fake Order of the Illuminati Facebook page on Facebook in like 2006 or 7, I think it was. And I pretended, I made the page as if I was the official Order of the Illuminati, and I used all my Wilsonian fun, uh,
Yeah.
Discordian antics, and I created this page, and it was like, some might know us as like this order or that order or this alien group or that. And it was a very playful page that I made for fun.
Yeah.
And it eventually, like, quickly ended up getting tens of thousands of likes, and, it just turned into like a whole thing. And it was, that was like a funny moment. But so there was early on before I was deepening my studies and kind of grasping what I was really looking at and engaging with. I was a conspiracy theorist and, would argue with Masons and Templars on Facebook and be like a rude, kid about it, and
Yeah. And I mean,
and so
that's part of
bodies,
my history
Peter.
too. Like, obviously, like you say, the 9/11 mega ritual, even though that was mystically minded, there were still, I think, differences in my take now that were reflected in that kind of video where there was a more, maybe there is some sort of occult knowledge in the elites and that Masons had some sort of role to play here. I don't know. For me
Right.
now, I mean, I still don't know what was in anybody's mind who orchestrated 9/11 or, whether to just take it at face value. It was terrorists or bin Laden or anything like that. But I've kind of let go of needing a sort of uh, what really happened and whose intention really had anything to play with sort of in any sphere of interest for me. It's more about the connections between the symbols and seeing everything as arising from like a dream. Like I've just the idea that this is God's dream is to me one of the more prevailing sort of narratives that I'll interact with is that,
Mm-hmm.
we're living in God's dream. We are God's dream or creator or whatever you want to call it. And the things that we see resonate because they come from one mind. That sort of explanation makes much more
Uh,
sense to me than 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 sort of conspiracy ones.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's, for me, that after all the years of syncing and, getting over the kind of like early paranoia and negativity and stuff. It became very clear to me that you know, the phenomenon of sync is like a natural law of some kind. It's like we've talked about, it's almost like gravity or some other thing that we're just kind of beginning to get the language to talk about. And these sync videos and the work we're doing is like, obviously it's just the beginning of kind of formulating a integrated understanding of this, phenomenon aspect of like psyche and self and world and stuff, and
Yeah.
so that's what I love about sync is that it takes you away from that disenchanted loser script reality model that you're a victim and a slave and a mind control subject. And it's like all those narratives are giving away your true placement in eternity and as a coexistent self manifested reflection of divinity as well. And so like it's like sync to me is like kind of it's sort of like nature just like reintegrating consciousness back to unity, through these things. And like it feels like, again, with like writing my book, I'm not writing from this angle of like, oh, like the the gods and of the Aeon chose me to deliver this information and I'm special, like nothing like that. It's like what I'm really trying to do here is kind of like say, hey, look at this thing, like look at this stuff, look at the large intelligent organism that we're a part of, and keep the
Yeah.
ego out and kind of be like, hey, look at these objects, look at these hyper objects that humanity engages with through aeons even, and then through
Yeah.
ages and cycles. And it's really fascinating to look at these objects and see the consistency of you know relationship between the human mind, the execution of like when humans try to like, I don't know, communicate, we use films, in these ways to kind of like um almost like crystallize and download and fully understand and celebrate like the truths of our human unfolding being. Film is where humanity kind of like captures this stuff. So yeah, so it feels like, film and cinema. I mentioned this a little bit in my original sync book article, but it feels like cinema is like in a way it's almost this like tribal actualizing process that goes on, that as we unfold our like dynamic humanity, we kind of like log and crystallize it in these films and celebrate life and reflect on life and integrate life through them and stuff. And then what I've noticed is that like you can look at the films, and when humanity turns its attention to a certain aspect of life, like such as the threshold between the physical and the immaterial, the physical and the immaterial planes of existence, we employ like certain consistent symbolism when we like concentrate on a certain facet of reality or life. And that's why I started like really focusing on the rabbit hole and the symbolism of the rainbow and all this stuff. Was that like I noticed if you look into films, whenever we're engaging in the borderline between the physical and the immaterial planes, we deploy the symbolism of the rainbow. It's very consistent across cultures that the rainbow symbolizes this connection between this world and an unseen world. And you got the Wizard of Oz, you go from the mundane world to this dream or interior world. And you got like dream time in other countries, and there's everybody has a different name for this immaterial plane. But the symbols that surround our communication around the idea that there is an immaterial plane and like an eternal spiritual world and stuff, the symbols are really consistent when we have films that go into it. So you see like the White Rabbit, and Alice goes down the rabbit hole into this other world, and then when you follow like Keanu Reeves' like film career, and you connect to these other dots, you see that like it's like Donnie Darko has like the 42 in it, and then like it's got Patrick Swayze in it, who is also with the 42 in Ghost, where he's like literally in a 42nd Street underworld.
Yeah,
And
the subway station, very
yeah,
overt, very very
and
clear, bright 42.
right, and you follow the 42, and Patrick Swayze, and it turns out it's like all throughout his career, and like you go to the film like Black Dog, and he takes this truck down into hell, this underworld, and there's a 42 on the license plate in the truck, and then he's hanging out with Meatloaf in that film, and Meatloaf oversees the creation of the Rainbow Man in Rocky Horror Picture Show, and
Yeah, yeah.
so like all these amazing, like if you look at my Film a Thin Skin or Membrane videos, sorry for folks that a lot of this may not make a lot of sense to without some context, but my Film a Thin Skin or Membrane videos demonstrate the like consistent symbolism of humanity using like the white rabbit, the rainbow, and boats to like communicate our interior knowledge of like our relationship to the immaterial plane of existence in the spirit world or whatever. And so if you that's what's kind of interesting about sync, is that like you can take these symbols, and no matter what time or place you're in, like humans kind of interact with them in the same way, and capturing that stuff and kind of like demonstrating that like um exactly, the mind of God is kind of like being projected out from inside of us and onto these screens. And when we're looking at the film, we're actually looking at like the inside of like the mind of like humanity, the dreaming mind of
Yeah.
man and God, or whatever.
I'm just seeing like
And
a visual metaphor for me right now is like kind of like Play-Doh factory or something. It's like if you're a creative and you want to talk about the star or you want to talk about the circle or whatever it is, it's like you have to shift the plate in front of you that has the star shape, and then you have to force the dough through that hole. And then it's kind of like, because there's one archetypal star, you kind of have to press the dough through that hole, and there's just certain characteristics of everybody having to use the same star shape to get the dough out. That no matter who is talking about, if you're talking about the same subject, Sirius or dogs or rabbits or whatever, there's context that is associated to that because it's coming from the same shape maker. There's one random way that I was just thinking of about saying a similar thing. But you said that you have some slides. Do you want to pull those up?
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can get this up here. This might be like a part where you'll edit a little bit, but we'll see. So these are just, this is like a little article bit from my book.
So where are you in where are you in the process? Are you researching? Are you writing? Are you finalizing? Like where are you at in the process of writing your book?
I guess I would say that like my goal is to probably like release it I would hope maybe by July, maybe
during
the dog days or something.
Okay, so you're into it.
Yeah, I'm deep in it. Like I've got a lot written. It's kind of like about sort of trimming fat in a lot of ways, and then like kind of tidying it all up into like a a cohesive narrative. So I would say like, yeah, I'm doing the finishing of the bulk of the like the research of the data and the kind of like the evidence, and getting that all in there, and then like between now and the summer will be really just like tidying that all up into like an executed expression, you know what I mean? So it's like almost ready to bake, I would say.
Awesome. I didn't realize it was that far in the process already. That's great.
Yeah, it feels like I've gotten up to the point of like kind of where we are almost in our chat here. It's like, like I kind of
to
the point of realizing that the sync also even has the 42 sync has some wild connections to the dawning Aon of Maat and stuff like that. And so yeah, I guess here I wanted to share is that I had some wild coincidences as I like set out to like write this book once
Hmm.
my work season ended this year. Um, I'm finally home and able to write and stuff. And so I was rewatching Donnie Darko recently and reflecting on like um, the themes of the film and how it relates to my like film thin skin or membrane code. And the something really interesting happened. So at the end, the last day of work around, my coworker had said to me that he was watching the movie Stranger Than Fiction. And he was telling me how much he just loves that movie.
Mm.
And he was like, "You probably find something deep in there." And I was like, and
Ah,
I've been having a really tense end of my season, you know. Um, and
yeah.
so I kind of knew that him mentioning this film, there was something really special that was there for me that I had to kind of like dig into. And so it's like the last day of my work season, I've been going through a lot of stress and stuff. And my buddy was like, "Yeah, just watch this. It was great. I bet you're gonna find something really deep in there." And I'm like, "Sure, I'm gonna watch it tonight. I bet I will."
Mhm.
And Stranger Than Fiction is this Will Ferrell movie that like um it's a kind of about a guy who starts realize he like starts hearing a narrator in his head and realizing that his like very mundane, boring life is like being narrated by some author. And he picks up on it suddenly and like and then there's like a whole bunch of stuff that goes on that leads him to like finding out that she's a real author and that he needs to kind of stop her from like killing him because that author tends to kill her protagonist in every book. So it's just sorry for the spoiler there. uh, so it's a wild film, but it's got to do with reclaiming narrative and stuff that's really interesting. And like and about kind of like sync and God and like and course of events. So there's a lot this film captures in it that sync heads can probably get some from. And so I'm checking this out and I realize that the movie has a lot of crossover vibe wise with like the Truman Show and a bunch of other films, but um
Yeah, true.
so I'm sorry.
I just said that's true. Yeah. And I see
Yeah, like
obviously Gyllenhaal is in there.
exactly. So we've got our membrane code rabbit hole connection there because she's Donnie Darko's sister.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I'm already, getting the sense I'm gonna this is part of the code when I see that. And like so then I'm
Yeah.
watching the film
But even
and
the
the film also
cover, the grass and the sky, I mean, obviously that's very loose, but Donnie Darko has all these scenes on the golf course where he's like lying down there and this the sky where the plane falls out of that just thematically I already feel that vibe.
exactly right. Yeah. And then you got your like the Truman Show, like the blue sky backdrop of
Yeah.
like is reality real? And it's like
Yeah.
the backdrop being kind of like this blue sky has this kind of um is it a simulation kind of
Yeah.
vibe with
Exactly.
some
Yeah.
and so that's an interesting thing and and oddly this film had some funny connections for me too because like Maggie Gyllenhaal plays like an anarchist from like a DIY bakery and Will Ferrell's like a tax collector or something and so there's this funny interplay of like um I don't know like modern stuff in there that's fun but anyway like you know I tell myself I'm certain there's going to be a 42 in this film. I know it's going to be like a key moment. It's going to happen. This is I'm just expecting it. And so sure enough, the end of the film, Will Ferrell meets his inevitable fate that was prophesized in the beginning of the film by the narrator. That's all like narrating his life. And but something changes. He looks at his watch, and it's the looking at his watch and like the time thing that is a sync throughout this whole film that I'll get to in a second. So something happens with his watch that always is what syncs him up and it sets the course of events in his life on the path of sync. So something happens with his watch. He meets his inevitable fate and gets hit by the 42 bus, and I'm like, oh, there it is, the
Oh,
42.
that's perfect.
And
Yeah.
and then Maggie Gyllenhaal is in Donnie Darko, where he wakes up on the golf course with the 42 on his arm and she's
Yeah.
interacting with him. So I start writing about Stranger Than Fiction and I noticed this fucking, excuse my language, I noticed this crazy scene where he looks at his watch right before getting hit by the 42 bus and there's another scene before that where he's sitting on his couch watching the TV, and he looks at his watch, and then the TV screen gets destroyed. This like construction thing comes in and breaks through, and it breaks the fourth wall right after he looks at this watch, you know? And I'm like, whoa, that's crazy because in Donnie Darko, when the TV screen forms into the portal, there's a clock on the screen. So in Donnie Darko, right before the film membrane becomes the portal, it flashes the symbol of time, and the screen becomes a portal, and the fourth wall breaks. And this, you know, Donnie Darko is riddled with the rabbit and the 42. The rabbit's watching this all go on right here. So then, right in Stranger Than Fiction with Maggie Gyllenhaal, we've got the same thing, a symbol of time, and then the
smashing the screen.
Wall, you know.
Yeah.
And then oddly enough, too, the last animal on the screen there, I don't know if I got that in this little thing here or not, but the last animal that Will Ferrell sees on the screen there before the claw comes through and breaks that membrane portal, it's a zebra, which we know, like, you know, Philip K. Dick nicknamed Valis the cosmic force of sync in his reality tunnel. He called it zebra. So it's kind of wild that you see the zebra on the screen while he's interfacing with this kind of divine intelligence that's interacting with him through time, symbolized by his watch, you know. So there's this vibe of like intelligence interacting with you through time and sync being a part of that, you know. And sync, you can think about it, sync implies time, syncopation. It's a funny little tie there. The white rabbit looks at his watch before he jumps down the rabbit hole and says, like, you know, oh, I'm late.
You know? The pocket watch is very iconically associated with the white rabbit, obviously, in Alice. Very nice.
So you've got consistent symbolism, and you know,
and just how time and space, you know, they're just such classic, obviously part of our dimension, the dimensionality of time and space. But I feel like even in sync, sometimes I've noticed this before, where you can see realities about time and space that are sort of expressed as science ideas. Like I made a video once about time travel called Time God, and a lot of that had to do with seeing a bit of a sync connection between the physical realities, like even how light bends when there's a heavy object like a black hole and that kind of thing. And I started seeing even those themes, like themes that you would hear about if you're researching, you know, space-time continuum and Einstein and these subjects. The key words that are associated with the subjects of space and time, like light, speed, and forces of nature, even that stuff, specific things, even absurd things like forces of nature. Like I put into Time God how, you know, Sandra Bullock is in a film called Forces of Nature, and then she's in a film called Gravity, and she's in a film where the lake house, where the whole house is made of glass, and the whole thing is about how the light goes through the glass, and then it just starts to create this whole vibe, which is something that I never overtly said about Time God, but there's also this idea that you're seeing physics. The reality of physics is just another system that you can sync with, just another system that's archetypal, that the same things that scientists see. And I feel like here too, we're seeing time and space as associated, and it's almost a sync. It's like the depiction of the clock. You know, there's other reasons why the artists would put that there too, but we're seeing like a very specific association of portal and time. And I feel like that's another strange attraction that we can see through the narrative of films and media and like the White Rabbit and all these things.
Totally. And wow, you just really like set off a chain of sync for me that connects to a blog post of mine from very early on. I wrote a blog post called Where It's At a long time ago, where I was reflecting on the tarot. And actually, if you take the word at, you get the first and the last letter of the tarot. That's the fool in the universe. So
Yeah.
where it's at always is the universe is always being born and is always finalizing and crystallizing. And so that's symbolized by the Fool and the universe and the infinite cycle of rebirth, cycling through the 22 major arcana, and the 22 paths of the Tree of Life. It's like the universe is created through time space, and Saturn is the planet of time, whose
Hmm.
tarot card is the universe, the letter T of the tarot. And then the Fool, Aleph, the beginning, the first tarot card, is the elemental tarot card of air or space. So when you actually take the tarot, you get space and time. Air is space, the Fool, Aleph, the first tarot card, and time is T, Tau, the universe, the end. And so when you're engaging in the alpha and the omega, essentially, of the moment, the now, you're always where it's at, where the Fool and the universe are birthing and crystallizing at all times. And
Yeah, that's cool
and that's
stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. There was that just triggered like a little gnosis there for me or something, you know.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and so there was another little funny personal sync I wanted to share if you don't mind.
Sure, sure, sure. It's also interesting that Will Ferrell, there's another 42 with him in I made a video Jesus once, and that focuses a lot on there's a moment in I actually think I'm getting actors mixed up here. Let's continue. You go ahead
Sure,
and
sure.
continue with your personal sync.
Yeah.
I think I was
Uh,
getting John C. Riley. No, I'd have to think about it. I feel like there's another 42. Wait a minute. He's in Talladega Nights with John C. Riley. And yeah, I thought there was another 42. I'm just getting my wires crossed.
I'm sure it'll come up.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so like the weird sync, that I might have to send you this slide. That might be the one screenshot I didn't get to grab just yet out of here. Did I? Okay, apologies. I'll have to send you a screenshot for this little part. But there was a really wild moment that happened when I was setting out to write the book, here in my room. And this is where that fourth wall breaking thing happens again. This is where the fourth wall broke for me, and I had like a wild moment. Um, I'm writing about the Donnie Darko, um, television screen portal, the film membrane thing, and at the same time, I just so happened for fun to be looking up the Ancient Aliens episode about the Hudson Valley where I live. Um, and in that Ancient Aliens episode, which is really great, I recommend people check it out. It's like, I think it's from 2019. It's about the Hudson Valley and the Druid connection and all this stuff. But basically, in that episode, as I'm on one screen, I'm writing about the Donnie Darko film portal, the Stranger Than Fiction TV portal. And then on another screen, I've got this thing playing, and it starts talking about the Hudson Valley where I live, and it shows the globe, and then it zooms down into New York State, and and it like opens like a portal, using the exact symbolism from the Donnie Darko like silver cord that leads him around in the film, the Destiny track he's on, Um, this Ancient Aliens deployed that exact portal symbolism to talk about the Druid stone architecture that might be here from pre colonial contact. That episode is really fascinating. It talks a lot about the mysteries of the Hudson Valley, which my book is going to be tapping into as well. So I
So the area where you live in, you're saying there's some history of pre-colonial contact centered around a stone.
Yeah, so really fascinating around me here is like, I live in the Hudson Valley. There's a town here called Stone Ridge, and this entire region is littered with pre-colonial and colonial stone architecture. Um, and this Ancient Aliens episode is basically going into how in the Hudson Valley there are these stone mounds, these little stone, uh, little rabbit hole thingies, actually, these little stone things they built into hillsides that line up precisely with the equinoxes and solstices. And they're in these specific locations that seem to be like possibly connected to ley lines. And so people would say that these were colonial like food and ammo storage or something, but it makes no sense that they would put this stuff so far from dwellings. So the idea that these very old stone structures that are aligned perfectly to receive the light of the solstices and equinoxes, it doesn't really hold up that these are colonial things. So there's a great guy who wrote a book, I believe, called America BC, I believe it's called, and it's about the stone structures and how they might actually be from Druid seafaring priests that came here and built them, because they look exactly like the mounds in Ireland and the British Isles and stuff like that the Druids created. Then you go to New Hampshire nearby here, and there's actually Druid stone engravings, a stone slab right near very Druid-like built stuff. And this stone carving is in the Druid language, and in America from pre-colonial contact. So there's strong evidence that the Druids did come to this land, and they did build these little cosmological aligned things. And so sure enough, the Hudson Valley is actually known as the Roswell of the East Coast. And there's actually all this lore and UFO sightings all where these like these stone things are. And there's like basically like on the internet of media about the Hudson Valley UFO phenomenon, and possibly there being ties to these Druid portals or whatever. So this Ancient Aliens episode uses the Donnie Darko portal, a symbol from Pop, to talk about portals, and it calls the Hudson Valley portal in the episode. And the screenshot I'll send you it'll show you the Donnie Darko portal going like right down onto where I live, in the Ancient Aliens. So that was the moment for me when the screen broke again, where the fourth wall happened. Like that was the claw coming through my Stranger Than Fiction, because it was like, I'm here talking about the rabbit hole, the portals, time-space distortion. And then on the screen, I'm just watching a portal land right where I am,
I once had an episode on LSD. That I haven't thought about in about a decade, but just you saying that sort of reminds me of this time me and my friend were doing LSD. And at some point we were watching the TV and I was talking about the Illuminati with this person and just how there's this group and there's these symbols and just the sort of basics. And something on the screen started having symbols about the Illuminati on it. And I was like, this is really messed up. This is really messed up. I'm like literally talking about this stuff and now it's on the screen. It's like very vivid sync kind of stuff. And then like to completely go into the realm of, now you're through the rabbit hole, the person knocks on the screen and says, gonk, 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 and says, you think you know what you're talking about. You haven't seen anything. And we kind of like, we melted, and we just became like, a wreck because, that was just beyond the capabilities of anything that seems reasonable. And I was like, I think in a little nuts for a while. One of the sort of more intense psychedelic moments I remember involving some of these weirder things where
that's a far out one. Do you mind if I tie in another element or two here that
go for it.
That's really fascinating. Like, so there's another thing here that was really, there's two parts I want to bring up that these are all going to also be in the book as they were kind of happening while I was writing it, so they have to go into the book now. But so I had this experience of the portal landing on me while I'm writing about it, and to me that felt like it was like a cosmic nudge being like, okay, like, this is you're in sync, like this is where you're supposed to be, whatever. And like, I have an injury right now, so I kind of have to be home, resting and able to write, and reflect and do all this work right now, which is cool. And so doing all that. And at the same time, right now, I have an album coming out with my band, Negative Racks, which is like a punk band that I started years ago just for fun. And, as I'm preparing to go on tour with the band right now, I've been having all this like stress and stuff. Like my work season was ending and I was injured and I was working on this really epic large wall I was building because I'm a stonemason. And I guess I was really stressed about things and I was almost thinking I'm gonna have to cancel the tour, and I was like stressed about a lot of things, and like, my the band actually like refers to like financial stress. Like Negative Racks is about like how being broke. It's kind of a period piece band of like post-pandemic stress punk, just like releasing stress and stuff. And
Post-pandemic
so
stress punk. I like that as a genre.
yeah, I made a joke that we're like calling it debt metal, like
Death
debt
metal.
metal.
Yeah, that's fun.
It's a fun band that we'd started for fun and just to as a place to put like a little bit of like the earthly stress and weight, just like kind of rock out and stuff. And so I wanted to I guess I could stop sharing my screen at this point too. I don't know if I have much I need to show from the remainder of that.
Yep.
So you don't have to stare at the same stuff. Um, but yeah, so released this record that's coming out, and we're taking it on tour. And I was like stressed, not sure if I was going to be able to do the tour with my injury and um, stuff like that. And also just felt like I want to we're changing the band name, and we're going to kind of be like changing our direction a little bit and like developing the concept more. So the band's no longer, it's not going to be this kind of period piece about stress and debt and da da da. We're moving on to new experimental territory. But anyway, so I have this thing where I'm stressing about the tour, and I'm telling my friends in my living room here about I'm stressed about the record, the tour, and the injury, and I'm having these crazy synchronicities. This portal landed on me while I'm writing my book here in the room, and we're all chatting, and I'm telling them a little bit about my sync stuff, and then somehow my bandmate mentions like this thing, the second Kelly. And he talks about how just randomly in a side conversation how he's been in the same room as R. Kelly before and all this stuff, and then he mentions the second Kelly, and I was like, "What are you talking about, the second Kelly?"
You got to be
And he was
careful
like,
if you're in a room with R. Kelly. You,
"Oh,
you
right,
might you might
yeah."
end up in a situation you don't want to be in.
Yeah, for real. And I couldn't tell you it's not that weird, but there is some funny stuff that maybe we'll have my bandmate on another time if there's
Yeah,
but
yeah,
so there was a weird thing where I heard the term the second Kelly come up, and I had just been talking about how I had this major sync with the portal and my writing, and I had also like resumed my ceremonial magic work after like quite a few years of intermittent taking a break from it. I like kind of took some time off a little bit from being able to do my daily meditations and meditation and ritual and study and stuff. And so I've resumed that work, and I had a really beautiful day the other day where I had this experience of like being reunited with myself that was unlike anything I've had in a really long time. And it was a really beautiful day of like returning to my meditation and my ritual work, and I had felt like I had rejoined myself on some other plane that it's very hard to articulate these things, but I guess even in the occult world there's a possibility that it's related to this thing called like knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, or like basically just like contact with your truest deepest self or whatever. It's like gold Aleister Crowley's magical tradition is to set you on a path of stability and structure so that you can facilitate the release of the genius within yourself, the true will within you, and your work on the earth or whatever. And so in re-engaging with my work that day, I had this amazing experience of reuniting with myself And it was as if there was these two Kevins like kind of coming back together in this cosmic marriage. And I can't quite articulate more about it than that, but it was a beautiful day. And it really set me back on the path of like knowing that I'm back on my, my path of resuming my study and my work and my my meditation. And so fresh in me is this crazy wedding that I just had with myself, and the possibility that it relates to this course of my initiation known as like knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel, or just contact with the star, the true radiant thing at the core of your being and stuff. So I was telling my friends about this reunion with myself that I just had earlier that day, and how it's been a really wild ride. And then my bandmate mentions the second Kelly, and I was like, "What's the second Kelly thing you're talking about?" And he's like, "Oh, dude, it's the weirdest R. Kelly song. It's actually like the noisiest, weirdest experimental one." And like my bandmate, Zoots in my band, is a accomplished experimental noise artist, and he's a total amazing mind. He's great. He knows a lot about the mysteries of sound and frequency and all this other stuff. That's really cool. And so. Zoots is like, "Oh man, actually the second Kelly is the most noisy experimental R. Kelly song. You got to check this song out. It's nuts." And I was like, "Well, that name is insane because like I'm
You're
syncing
going
with this
through a
idea,
similar, yeah.
the second Kevy right now. Like I'm having this reunion with myself sync. So I was like, we got to look it up now. And he's like, "Yeah, man, put on the song." So this is another slide I'll have to send to you. I guess I stopped sharing my screen, but the I pull up the song to listen to the experimental noise that's oddly featured on this one R. Kelly track, and to see, I'm like, there's got to be a sync here with the second Kelly thing and the second Kevy thing, whatever. And sure enough, pull up the screen, and it's like this R. Kelly album cover, and it features the rated R from the films because it's like R. Kelly or whatever. And the song, the second Kelly, is actually a song where R. Kelly's holy guardian angel basically comes in during the song and like takes the mic from him and like takes over. And so like the R. Kelly song, the second Kelly, is actually like a dramatic song about like the deeper, realer R. Kelly like coming through him and taking the mic and taking over for a while, and I don't know, then just doing whatever kind of stuff he does. But that song is really interesting because it features this little allusion to this mystery of like the holy guardian angel and the spiritual self that is like the spiritual double of all of us on like the other side of the rainbow. So it's like that's what's interesting about this Rainbow Bridge and Rabbit Hole Sync and the mysteries, the occult and spirit and 42 is that the 42 like implies this double of all of us, kind of, that there's this part of us all that is not mortal and fleshy, but is also like eternal and made of divine light or whatever. And so that's like the mystery, what I call the human or whatever. That's my one of my art DJ names is human, and it's like kind of how I crystallize my understanding of this stuff. But it's like we are all the human, like we all are light and earth conjoined and refracting out into the rainbow of the dynamic expression of art.
I like that. Human. The human. Yeah. It's nice.
So and that's the kind of the vibe that's interesting about all this occult stuff and the second Kelly and the idea that on the other side of the rainbow is the eternal aspect of each of ourselves. So there's this second one of us, this holy guardian angel, whatever, this mystery, and that I found it really fascinating that like this this work of the spiritual path, it kind of like is just about merging these two realities here. And that's kind of like what some of the work of the ritual and meditation and reflection and stuff and symbolism is kind of like merging, like understanding that the eternal spiritual world is one with this physical world, and they're not actually separate, and they're not other. And that like this moment is like the divine eternal
100%
expression of the mind of God or the body of God and everything. And so
I feel like
that's the kind of beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's like I feel like every moment sort of invites that realization, because there's sort of there's this inherent drama in the fact that there even is a moment, because you're kind of like you're split, but by the very nature of existing, you're saying, well, there's an I, there's a me, there's a experience here. So there's something independent of everything else, or something that is not the whole. If you can even have a conversation, if you can even think, then you're separate, you're dual. So there's always
Right.
this tension between your existence and then the aha of your non-dual nature, which there's this invitation and this drama. And I think for some people, there's an arc to it where it can be like your whole life is still on this journey to go through your aha. And then I think sync is, for me, is the constant invitation to go, aha, that healing of my limited self, and then awareness of my spiritual, bigger, or non-dual self, where there isn't even that conversation, doesn't even have meaning, where it's like there's just this nowness that is this I am kind of thing. But it seems encoded in every separate moment that there's this drama to bring you back to the aha. And that's, to me, often what the sync code is. It's like, oh, I have to be reminded that I'm a non-dual thing, kind of thing, you know?
Totally, totally.
So the idea that there's always two, that seems, archetypal, that, and then that figuring out of the dissolving of the two into just the I am.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's fascinating. That I love that you mentioned that, because that's actually, this really ties everything right to like a nice thesis point of the 42, the Maat, sync, all this stuff. Like, it's really wild that I love the way you just brought that that sync requires the two, like that we must there must be a departure from the bliss and infinite unity of nothingness, of like infinite eternal unity. It requires two to break apart and experience the joy of reunion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
It's like literally sync is saying that there's two. And then there's the message of the two, which is that it's the one,
that's why sync is 4-2. for
Exactly. You got it.
um,
T for two.
right.
Some,
And
yeah.
Alice's Wonderland sipping tea for
There you
two.
go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very
Uh,
nice.
so there's, this tarot card here that's really beautiful. It's Aleister Crowley's Libra tarot card, Adjustment. It
Hmm.
features the goddess Maat here, who we've been
Hmm.
talking about.
Yeah.
And so Crowley has this really beautiful formula that I love. That if you look into his writings in the Book of Thoth about what Maat represents, what Libra represents, what all this touches on, you'll find that Crowley has this amazing thing about the formula of 0 equals 2, which is that basically, like, 0 is the undivided unity of being, and the only way to even behold that undivided unity of being is to you have to have two. So in
Hmm.
Crowley's
Or
you
two.
know
Yeah. Yeah.
reflections on the nature of the unity of being, is that 0 is 2, and so, like, the true number of 0 is 2, and the true number of 2 is 0, because the
That's
unity of all
cool.
things and the necessity to break, right? So
Yeah.
Crowley will tell you that, like, the code, one of the laws of the principle of the goddess Maat and the force of Libra in the cosmogenesis and, the universe and stuff, is that Maat 42, the goddess of the 42 principles, who um, her formula is 0 equals 2, which is sync. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's really beautiful, and this is where it gets kind of trippy, because this is where these understandings that are captured in this stuff, they kind of represent to me like the new gnosis of the era that we are currently living in. and it feels like this is the stuff that we're doing, is like integrating and crystallizing this new gnosis. And that's where this fits into the Crowley stuff, is that, like, Aleister Crowley believed that the delivery of his spiritual system was liberating humanity from the kind of like calcified spiritual systems of the age previous. Like, Crowley had new gnosis to share with humanity, which would require then a new system and new symbols and new formulas, And so that's what Crowley did in his lifetime, was evidencing the Aeon of Horus and the 93 current. But I guess what I've found myself in here is a point where I'm realizing that I might be harvesting or participating in the revelations of the gnosis of the Maat era, the Maat
Well,
Aeon or something.
one thing that occurs to me with Maat, just on a sort of my personal history situation, would be like, just in Afrikaans, it's Maat is a word that means friend.
Oh, I love it.
The specific, I would MAAT, that's Maat, that's friend. It's
Mhm.
my mate, my Maat,
Yeah,
and I just feel like that's, I don't know, goes along with what you're saying. And, it's even like this two is one thing. I keep seeing the heart object. It's kind of like, well, it's love, but it's like that the symbol of love has those two lobes. It's like
right.
it's a very like dual symbol. Its nature is two, but that's
Right.
literally the image for heart is this thing that, is very much two.
I
Um,
love that.
I was also, I remembered the 42 reference to Will Ferrell. That was Step Brothers. There's a scene in Step Brothers where John C. Reilly calls Will Ferrell and he's like, turn on channel 42. I'm not actually sure if it's Step Brothers or Talladega Nights, but there's definitely a scene where John C.
That is,
Reilly is calling
yeah,
and he's like, turn on channel 42. So just
right,
need
right.
to think that there's another connection there.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you say that then too, because the Mott connection to friend, and friend implying two, T for two
That's
thing,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
in the tarot, um in the kind of like the constitution of the symbolism and um the occult infrastructure of the tarot, the pairing of Mott is with the Fool. It's like the Fool and the Harlequin or whatever, and Um, this is the zero and the two interplaying. The Fool is the zero tarot card.
Right.
Um, and then Adjustment is the eighth one, but it represents a higher octave of the Fool at zero. Is like the Mott, um, and this figure, the Harlequin in the deck here, represents like the higher octave of the Fool,
Did
and
you
this
say
interplay.
Harlequin?
Yeah, the Harlequin. Yeah, that's what Maud is considered, like this Harlequin, because she represents like the dance of duality and
Well, it just
thus
opens up
illusion.
so much stuff, having that Harlequin connection, obviously. Yeah.
Sure, we're gonna harvest a
Yeah.
bunch of fascinating sync now with that, and
Yeah.
so that's interesting, because then that's the Mott, um, even in your language, imposing a pairing and this dual thing, the two again, the like the duality and the non-dual self mystery,
Yeah.
um, and so there's something interesting there that we can tap into too, which is that, like, 9/11, like the destruction of the twin towers, and the destruction of the symbolism of the two, is a dramatic thing, and Aleister Crowley, and I believe it's might be the Vision and the Voice, I believe it is, where he's scrying the Enochian ethers, but he has this line that I always found really sinky and interesting, which is where he's like, tremble, O ye pillars of the world, for the universe is in travail of a mighty and terrible child, or whatever. And basically, like, what that vision that Crowley was saying is that he was seeing the Aeon of Horus coming to end the spiritual Aeon of duality, where like the idea that like spirit and body, that like body was evil and sinful and spirit was only the only thing that was pure. Like Crowley's delivery of his spiritual system of Thelema was came to like end the kind of the binary of the what was known as the Aeon of Osiris or the patriarchal age or whatever. And so Crowley saying like, you know, tremble, O ye pillars of the universe, for you're in travail, you know, for a terrible child is coming. What he's basically saying is that duality is going out the window,
Hmm.
and the non-dual transcendent consciousness is what's incoming. That's the incoming Aeon of Horus. And so there's some really trippy stuff there that, you know, the 9/11 event
Hmm.
reflects um, a bit of that vision in a way. I'm not saying that's like something to people to
A
obsess
positive
about or anything
thing.
like,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's not, I don't think people should get trippy on that kind of like useless side of things, honestly. But there's a fascinating thing there that the symbolism of 9/11 is um it does have an aeonic transition thing to it. And
Yeah.
then you've got your 2001 monolith overlooking it right there, and then you've got
Mhm.
Flight 93 in the mix. There's a little bit of
Right.
93,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
your work with the ritual and, you know, Oz at the uh
Yeah. The
you
Whiz
know.
stuff as well connects to.
So I wanted to get to the Whiz too, actually, if you don't mind just getting
Yeah.
there, but I didn't want.
Let's talk for 5 more minutes and then we'll say our goodbyes. I gotta go hang out with my daughter and wrap up bedtime and that kind of stuff. Nap time is coming up. So
Love it, love
those,
it.
but let's chat about the Whiz and then we'll say goodbye.
Cool, man. Yeah,
That's
sounds
cool with
good.
you.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so the Whiz thing is funny. I'll have to send you a couple shots you can, you know, throw over the screen or whatever. But um, I noticed the night that um, here in New York, Zoran Mamdani was elected.
Hmm.
Um, I, I knew there was something really. I knew there was something magical going on there,
Hmm.
uh, and I there was a sense, and it was in the air, even in the town. I mean, the world that night in general. But like that night, um, he won, and it was a big deal, and it was a big deal here locally because the amazing music venue that I work at here, Tubby's, who just so happened to actually, it's funny, Tubby's just dropped this new shirt design with like the Sphinx and the Giza
Uh,
pyramid. Like, I have no
yeah,
idea why they did that.
it's great.
Like,
It's
so
great.
it's very odd, and I just kind of wanted to rep, you know, Tubby's because it's a really amazing music venue that I work at and I book events at, and they do a lot of great stuff for the culture of New York and the underground art scene, and just a really great place. But
Yeah.
anyway, so Tubby's was on my mind the night that Mamdani won, Zorhan won, because he actually had been to Tubby's. I'd been to Tubby's the same night as him before. They were celebrating
Cool.
a victory of local Democratic Socialists here, Sarah Hanna, and she had her celebration of her victory at Tubby's, and you know, Zorhan was part of the New York Socialist Democrat group with her, and so there's some. I knew that he looked familiar when he got elected too, and I was like, man, I feel like I've seen that guy at Tubby's, and it turned out I had, you know, and like, so the night he won, like, wow, this is really wild. He's like, you know, it's like this good guy is stepping in, and like the battle against good and evil feels like it's like, you know, there's like a new, at least a win for the people happening here in New York, or and in the larger battle for good.
Yeah,
And
it did seem like a big positive shift. You know, we'll see
yeah,
what it means in the bigger picture, but for sure, a little bit of light in an otherwise very kind of uh, dim political climate, dim,
indeed.
dim quality
Uh,
of, I don't know, sort of hopefulness and vibrance and stuff, if you want to put it that
yeah,
way.
totally, yeah. And so, you know, so the night that he had won, you know, the world was alive with all this hope, and it felt like there was this kind of like battle against good and evil, where there was like a little bit of a win happening for good,
Yeah.
um, and I'm kind of tripping. I'm like, man, it's so weird that there's photos of this guy hanging out at my, you know, my favorite place and my job, and my community zone. And so it was kind of cool. I was like, wow, look at the, the earth right now, and how like this good guy in this major kind of moment on earth with, the forces at play and all these things going on. I was like, it's really trippy that the little bar that I work at down the street has this tie with this guy. And
Yeah.
so I'm, just vibing on that. And oddly enough, that night at Tubby's, there was this really wild ritual group there called Akchamel playing, and they play like really ritualistic shamanic stuff, and they dress in these like shaman outfits, and they black out the room, and they sing in tongues. And that night, Tubby's was the weirdest portal I've ever seen there that I didn't open, because I also have my own electronic music and seasonal like equinox ritual performance thing I do. This project called Sopdet, named after Sirius, and I do these fun electronic music seasonal celebration ritual performances at Tubby's. And I open these kind of like occult little performance art portals where we celebrate the departure of the sun into the winter solstice, and I dramatize it through theatrical ritual, and like the sun king gets killed and the sun goes away, all this fun stuff. Anyway, like, but I'm the first person I know to be opening occult portals at Tubby's and doing like ritual stuff. And just so happened that the night that Zorhan was elected, I've some other group that's much more popular was doing their kind of occult portal opening at Tubby's. And I was like, it's so weird that this like Tubby's is alive with this really cosmic shit tonight. And like, and the Zorhan thing is going on and stuff, right? So the next morning, I think it was Zorhan went and marches over the Brooklyn Bridge with this banner that says like "Our time is now" or something. And the font on that banner is particularly like 1980s like vintage vibe. Like it's 2025 and we've got crazy freaking laser technology and all this stuff, but for whatever reason, Zorhan's banner is like fresh out of the 1980s, like real aesthetic vibe.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
I think I can see it in my head, like the font. Yeah.
yeah, it brings you back to like a 1980s film. It's like you feel
For sure.
watching a scene from the 80s. And so then like I pick up on that, I'm like, that's weird. There's something kind of funny about that. This feels like hyper context like going on, like there's some sync here. And it's the Bridge, which we know from your work and mine that, the Brooklyn Bridge becomes the yellow brick road to Oz and the Twin Towers. And Oz and New York are one letter off in the alphabet, OZ and NY, as you point out in your early work, I'm like, so I'm sinking out, and I'm like, whoa, Zorhan is like got this 1980s looking banner, and then resonating with this 1980s film, The Whiz, which is about like kind of racial equality and like the struggles of the earthly stuff that we're transitioning through right now, of and stuff. So it's like The Whiz contains kind of like the aeonic struggle of the transition into the Aquarian age of equality, and the Aon of Justice of Maat and the Aon of Equality and Justice. Like there's this vibe of Zorhan leading us over the bridge into this like Emerald City of Oz, New York, and so I'm seeing all that, and it's just really tripping me out, like to see the 1980s font and the bridge walking resonating with The Whiz. It's like it feels like we're going down this ritual path, and so then I didn't realize, but the Wicked 2 or something is coming out. So now The Whiz just starts like popping up in the environment everywhere after I start writing about it. And so, you got Wicked out right now and all the rainbow symbols in that film. Someone had told me they've never seen more rainbows in a film before, actually.
Then
so I got to go see that.
Wicked?
Right now, the earth is actually just like covered in rainbows in these theaters and people's minds and stuff. So,
yeah.
So
there was,
anyway,
it was yeah, I mean, I don't want to really interrupt, but Wicked is like the movie theater that's closest to my house that we drive by pretty frequently. It has the giant bubble with Ariana Grande in it, and she's Glinda, and she's like coming down in like, I don't know, the giant bubble crystal ship of hers that she floats around in the movie. And for some reason, I just keep thinking about the AI bubble and Ariana Grande. She's Ari, her her short for her name is Ari, A-R-I. So for me, I keep seeing AI bubble. AI bubble is sort of my weird association matrix with Wicked, is I keep seeing the AI bubble. That's like,
Interesting.
for me, that the term AI bubble just sounds to me like some sort of spiritual or synchy kind of thing that I'm still meditating on to get deeper. And a part of me was like, I need to go watch Wicked to, you know, figure out the AI bubble kind of thing. But yeah, please finish. I mean, oh,
Well, it's so weird
yeah, go ahead.
it's so weird that you say that, because just last night I was like, I was kind of trying to start preparing for our conversation, but then I was like, I feel like I also just want to catch up with Jake and let this thing happen as it is. So like there wasn't too much prep to do last night, and I ended up just kind of hanging out for a second. But I came across this video where a guy was talking about how the behavior of like bubbles and like oil on bubbles resonates with the patterns of the Earth's weather patterns, and how like there's this, I think it's like this Instagram account that's really fascinating, called like baseforge.us, I believe, and he does this really cool like cymatics and kind of like hermetic mystery stuff. But anyway, he was pointing out this thing about bubbles, and how bubbles like resonate with like prisms and light, and it just seemed like when I was watching this, I was like, man, we really haven't covered the bubble in sync yet. And this bubble, when you look at rainbow like bubbles, they have like the rainbow hue on them, and
that's right. And it's very Jupiter to me, that sort of oil slickness, it's like the whirls and the sort of, the patterns. That like Jupiter to me is like this giant bubble. I've seen like there were photos that were like in when you walked past Apple stores for a while, they had a line of like advertising was like this bubble, and it was like somebody had taken these super intense like close-up photography of like bubbles in like with a very dark background, and it looked just like Jupiter to me. Like I was like even wondering, are these photos of Jupiter? But they were actually just like, I looked a little bit into it. It was like some photographer who had like taken these real, maybe played with the color a little, but like got these amazing like Jupiter looking bubbles. And I just resonates with what you're saying.
Well, then we get like, is it Bubble Boy? Is that Donnie Darko too? Is that Bubble Boy? Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
Because then rainbow is technically actually like a full sphere, but because of our like perspective, so we're always actually in a rainbow bubble at all times. You know what I mean? And like,
I think you got something.
Yeah, it's like the key to like gnosis is kind of like that we're all always in the rainbow bubble, and we are experiencing the great non-dual unity of being in our own personal rainbow bubbles.
I guess the one thing, I don't know if that's where you were going, but with the Zorhan is the OZ stands out so much,
That's why I mentioned.
I just feel like that's to me like it screams that when you're talking about Whiz and Oz and the Brooklyn Bridge, you have the first two letters, that Zo, and I mean it sounds like Zohar, Zohar, like Kabbalah. It just gets very like loaded with meaning, this name and these themes.
Oh, bubbles. We got to also. Just last night was reviewing some of my old stuff, and the bubble is in the fountain too.
Very much so. The tree.
Cool
thing going to, I don't know, Galactic Center or Shabal. What do they call it there? Like the star, the dying star.
Yeah. There's some.
Is it Shabalba? Sure. I would have to something like that. Yeah.
That's in my Film a Thin Skin or Membrane series, features a couple of cuts from the fountain, and it kind of integrates the bubble. Bubble pops up in my membrane videos. Actually, it's kind of funny, so might even see some more that we don't know. But,
it's something that I do think about a little bit, the bubble. And I made some videos. I'm not sure if they were like Patreon exclusives or whatever, but I did a little bit with Bubble Boy and Jake Gyllenhaal and some syncs, because he wears the helmet of Mysterio, which is basically a bubble as well. In Spider-Man, he's the Spider-Man villain Mysterio, and he's literally in a bubble. And it's a very kind of perfect thing with Jake Gyllenhaal, the bubble.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fun.
but
I'm definitely we're gonna have to you and I'll have to, follow the breadcrumbs and see maybe for another conversation what we come up with, what more
yeah,
bubble gnosis we,
I
you
think we
know?
should do this again at some point when you're
Yeah,
settled again and you feel up to it. Hit me up
I would
and
love to. Anytime, man. Yeah.
we'll continue this. I'd like to hear more about your book as it comes closer to putting that out. We should
Yeah,
have you on again, and yeah, just keep in touch. And yeah, I I very much enjoyed the conversation, and I appreciate that you took all that time come and connect. And I don't know, do you have anything else you want to say? Do you want to tell people where they can find your stuff and your socials and that kind of thing?
yeah, sure. Yeah, so my bulk of my sync work is still on like Vimeo and YouTube. My Vimeo is at Indra Danush 42. It's a little hard to spell, but it's Indra Danush 42 on Vimeo. And then on YouTube, I believe it's like Kevin 23420. My old videos are on there. I haven't really used the YouTube in many years, but
Hmm.
check out my video. There's some up-to-date stuff that, I mean, I haven't made sync videos in quite a while, but I recommend checking out the Film or Thin Skin or Membrane collection of four
Hmm.
particular videos on there to start. And then there's a really great episode that Jake and I did together called the Starmy webinar series back in 2013. And I just watched that episode yesterday, prepping for our talk. And it's obviously it pairs really great for someone if you enjoy watching Jake and I catch up on this episode. This kind of picks up where that Starmy episode from
Yeah.
2013 leaves
I'll
off.
I'll add links to all
And
that stuff, and then people can just follow those if they're interested in these things. You can check those
yeah,
out.
absolutely. Yeah. I definitely recommend checking out that Starmy episode if you're looking for the most context for our conversation. But yeah, and then I'm on Instagram, Indradanush42. I don't always take follows on there because it's a
Mm.
little bit of a personal account. So I
Hmm.
might direct people back to my like X account maybe to follow some updates on my sync work. I've got to figure out how to divide my private and personal going forward with the book release and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's
Um,
tricky. Social media is tricky at this point with all that.
yeah,
I don't really have a place where I can share personal. I was so focused in the last few months, like trying to do sync thing. But if I want to put like a personal interest thing in there, it just feels like not the right vibe or community. It's just, yeah, how to keep that stuff. I don't know, it's changed so much. It felt like seamless in the beginning. The tone of social media felt like it was just this playful thing, and you can like, but now it's kind of like, I don't know, the climate has just changed considerably in the last few decades.
it's true. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely weirder times. I've definitely had my ins and outs with some like scary people on the internet and all that stuff. So it's kind of good to be wise these days.
Hmm.
Um, and so you can try to follow me at Indradanush42 on Insta, and I might do a screening, but check out my X account, maybe Indradanush42. Otherwise, my Vimeo, um, and follow Jake's page because I guess I'll hopefully be catching up with you again and stuff. And um,
Yeah, for sure.